Hello, and welcome to Around the Political World with John Rothman. I am your host, John Rothman. If you're a fan of the show, make sure to hit the follow button on the top right of Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening at this very moment. When you hit follow, leave a review or share an episode with a friend. It helps other people discover the show, keeps us going, and as I like to remind you each and every day, it expands our base. I want to speak today about our Constitution and the relationship of Donald Trump and his administration to the Constitution. I have reported to you in the past that when Donald Trump took the oath of office on January 20th last, he swore 35 words. I do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. Yet, something is seriously wrong in the White House, and this president reflects that very disturbing trend. Stephen Miller, the deputy chief of staff at the White House, is now calling for habeas corpus, a guaranteed constitutional right, to be removed from the Constitution. This is, to me, one of the most disturbing developments in any word that has come from the White House. There is no doubt that habeas corpus is essential to American liberty. Our right to immediate and speedy trial is something we treasure. And yet, as Stephen Miller pointed out, 4 times in our history, habeas corpus has been suspended, twice during the Civil War. We are not in a civil war. We are not being invaded. And the idea that the Trump administration would want to see habeas corpus removed in order to strike back at the courts, in order to prevent the courts from doing their job, is to me, well, one of the most disgraceful things I have ever heard. I want to emphasize and underline the fact that when a presidential administration, which is governing under the Constitution, suggests that a constitutional right be removed from our province, there is something terribly wrong. And every American ought to be up in arms. If a Democrat in the White House had proposed what Donald Trump's administration is proposing, the Republicans would have been up in arms. Will the Republicans now abandon their belief in the Constitution, in the document of freedom which guarantees all of our freedom? That is the question that every American must ask, and it must be answered. There is another clause in the Constitution which Donald Trump seems to want to disregard, and that is the Emoluments Act. Qatar, a nation with whom we've had a dubious history, is proposing that they give as a gift Air Force One. That's right, a plane that they constructed would become Air Force One. Well, let me tell you something right now. The Emoluments Clause forbids, explicitly forbids gifts from foreign powers, particularly gifts which are clearly a bribe. This president, who is planning to go to the Arabian Peninsula this week, is saying, oh yes, we're going to accept the gift, and when it's all done, I'll still fly it after I leave office, and then it will go into the Trump Presidential Museum and Library. I have never heard such a suggestion, clearly a bribe being offered to an American administration, and it must be rejected under the Emoluments Clause of the Constitution. How can this president so blatantly violate the Constitution and yet be applauded by members of the Republican Party? And it extends, I must tell you, tragically, to actions being taken by this administration. ICE arrested the mayor of Newark, New Jersey. That's right, and not only that, 3 members of Congress are also now being threatened with some sort of legal action because they witnessed what happened. The abuse of power now being demonstrated by ICE is something that we all need to be aware of and protest against. And yes, thank God we have courts who can fight back and will fight back. And then there was the news that Kristi Noem did the firing of the acting administrator of FEMA, who had been in office for a day. Why would he be fired? Well, he's not in favor of dismantling certain aspects of FEMA and other aspects of Trump policy. And so he was summarily dismissed. May I ask you a question? This is not an example of one abuse, or two abuses, or three abuses, even four abuses, because if you count the three members of Congress and the mayor, it goes beyond that. This is the misuse of a federal agency. And by the way, an attempt by this administration to intimidate those who are assigned the task of protecting us. This is something that we need to understand. The administration is gutting FEMA. And when there is a disaster, who do we send into the breach? FEMA. There is, my friends, something terribly wrong, and it needs to be exposed. It needs to be understood. This administration calls the judges who are ruling against them overwhelmingly rogue judges. No, my friends. It is not the judges who are rogue. It is Donald Trump's administration, which is rogue. And the only discipline we have against what they are doing is for the courts to act, and indeed for the people to respond with great vigor in November when we have the next election. I mean November of 2026. A long time to wait. And Donald Trump seems determined to exercise unlimited power until there is some restraint offered. Now, we are told that the Supreme Court will rule on some of these issues. I have already defined clearly for you that we now look to two justices, the Chief Justice, John Roberts, and we look to Amy Coney Barrett, and we ask a simple question: will they side with the so-called conservative majority? And where is the respect for the Constitution? And where is the respect for our freedom? And where is our ability to uphold truth, justice, and yes, the American way? I have touched on this morning, and of course, there is much more to discuss, including the issue of tariffs and the negotiations now going on with China. And you can see the boomerang effect. When something is announced that the market likes, it goes up. When it's something they don't like, it goes down. And you may say that's normal, but this is not normal. What Donald Trump is doing is not normal, and it is affecting all of us. All of us are affected economically, politically, and certainly in terms of our American military, with the purge of generals taking place by Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense. Well, and now, by the way, you know that Pete Hegseth is also determining what books can be on the shelves of the military academy. This is something unprecedented in the history of our republic, and we must resist it, we must fight it, we must expose it. I hope that we will have the courage to stand up to what is clearly a contempt for the American Constitution. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Around the Political World with John Rothman. I am John Rothman. Make sure to follow along and let me know your thoughts on the show by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts and sharing an episode with a friend or colleague so we can continue to grow and expand, which is, of course, our goal. You can interact with me on Facebook, LinkedIn, and, of course, by directly emailing me. And that is, of course, what I thrive on. That is your comments, your suggestions. And of course, a special thank you to Gogo Zoger, the wonderful producer of this podcast. Without Gogo, well, Around the Political World with John Rothman would be, well, a very different podcast. So to all of you, I will be back tomorrow. Heaven only knows where the world will have turned by then. But you and I will be right here on Around the Political World. with John Ruffman. See you then.